You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 on Instagram and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold. Today we welcome in Veronica Cardenas, founder of Humanigration, immigration empowerment for Trailblazing Latinos, located in the New York City metropolitan area. How are you, Veronica?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on. It was a pleasure to connect in New York at the event in early August. It was great to see you there.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I had a good time. So, Veronica, let's jump right into your story. We featured you July 31st, 2023. And right off the bat, your story was very compelling. You wrote, I was an unlikely immigration prosecutor torn between two worlds, the daughter of immigrants entrusted to uphold the same laws my mother broke when she came into America. So your parent, as a way of background, your parents immigrated to America from Colombia and Peru. What have they told you? I know usually we're going to go back in time, but just to kick it off, what have they told you about their process and entry into America?
So growing up, I always knew that my parents weren't born in this country, but the whole process, their whole story was a big question mark. It was something that they didn't want to talk about with me. And I think a lot of that comes, now that I'm a lot older, I see there's a lot of shame in the ways that people have to come to this country because unfortunately, visas are very difficult to get depending on what country you're from. And so there's a lot of shame behind people's immigration stories. So it wasn't until I got older when I started asking questions, and I actually took my mom to dinner once to sit her down, and I said, I just want to know everything, how did you get here? And this is once I really knew a lot more about immigration law.
You know what's so interesting is I don't think I've ever, and I don't think I've been hiding in a closet, but I don't think I've ever heard somebody describe coming into the country like an immigrant as shameful. And for me, that actually puts in that really hits the nail on the head. I could totally see that. And I think that's a really interesting description. So how old were you when you took your mother to dinner and said, okay, tell me everything?
This was maybe 2018.
Okay, so it was fairly
recent.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did she?
And I think one of the reasons why I did that was because the administrations had changed. I was working under Trump, and
right.
Immigration comes in waves. You see a lot of people from one particular country coming, and this was a time where a lot of people from Central America were coming, and I don't know. I just saw United States citizen children sitting there with their non-citizen parents in court, and it just really struck a chord with me. And so that's when I sat down and I was like, all right, Mommy, we need to talk about this.
It's unbelievable that you actually, we're going to go into that, but you got that experience for almost 13 years too. So let's bring it back a bit. Tell us about your journey growing up, where you're from, growing up with two immigrant parents. Who were, I guess, relatively new to the country?
Yeah, they came in the 80s, and my dad moved us into it's an Italian town. So I was one of two Latinas growing up, but I don't know. I always knew that I was different. I didn't look like everybody else. My parents spoke Spanish at home, and so that was a difficult adjustment for me too, going between the English and Spanish. So I feel like I always felt out of place growing up.
Okay. So what was the moment? Did you have like an epiphany or a moment where you knew you wanted to be a lawyer?
It's a really funny story. I did not like it, but it was like so silly because I went to college and I was an English major, and my plan was to be a teacher. I was like, all right, I'm just going to be a teacher. That's all I knew. And then I went away
What
for
you
spring
say that
break.
like I'm just going to be a teacher. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, it was kind of like one of those things. Like my parents never told me I had to go to college. So I was going to school and everybody's applying to colleges. So I'm like, I guess this is what I have to do too.
Right.
Like, it wasn't like my mom didn't graduate college. My dad didn't go to college. So it was kind of like, I didn't, I didn't know what my next step was. So I just kind of picked, all right, teacher, that sounds great. Let's do that. And then I went away for spring break and I met this person who had just gotten into Harvard and he was there celebrating. He's like, I'm going to Harvard Law. And I'm
Wait,
like,
whoa,
you
whoa,
look
whoa, whoa.
so
Let's back
happy.
up. You were on spring break and a guy came
Yeah.
up to you and said he was going to Harvard Law. I
Well,
don't
it
know,
didn't have it
Veronica.
like,
There's I don't know. Do we have Google back then? Did
but
you like look them up or that sounds
it
like a
doesn't even
classic
matter
line if I've
because
ever heard one.
you know what? And it was so funny because I wasn't even thinking about it like that. I was just like, you look so happy about like your life's path. So maybe I should go to law school. So
Okay.
I came back from that trip thinking like, you know what? I think I want to go to law school. It was a very like, it is a funny story. All my friends are making fun of me. They're like, you're gonna you have to take like the LSATs and you have to study and do all
Yeah,
this
but
stuff.
I
And I
still
was
want to
like,
know if this guy like went to Harvard. Like that's still what I'm caught on right now. Sorry.
he did actually go to Harvard,
Okay,
but
all right,
that's
fair enough.
like
But that's great. So your
that's
friends were
funny.
like, all right, like there are actually steps you have to take to go to law school. You can't just go in the door and like sit in the classroom, right?
Yeah.
What did this guy say? Like to really be like, you should go to law school. I mean, you really must have had some sort
Nothing. No, it was literally like where we were out and he was with a group of friends and it's spring break, like, hey, why did you come here? Why did you like where are you coming from? Whatever. And he was like, I'm celebrating because I got into Harvard Law.
That's amazing. All right, well, that's good. I'm glad it worked out.
Is that like what
Um,
that's really funny. Is
if you
that a
could
first for
find
you?
him, we'll feature him on Lawyer Stories. How about that? Okay, so let's move on from this side story here that I'm creating, the side narrative. So, like, what was law school like for you? You got into law school. Like, what was it like? What was your law school experience like?
Oh my God, my law school experience was so difficult. Like I got in and I think that was like I was like, okay, I'm in. And then I didn't realize that once you're in, that's when the real work actually starts.
Right.
So I, didn't have money to pay for a tutor. I almost failed my first semester. Like I was,
I mean, who doesn't, right?
um,
No, I'm just kidding. It's
yeah, but
difficult. I mean, come
I,
on.
I don't know. I was, it was, I forget. I think it was like the legal writing class.
Yeah.
Like the professor was like, I'm going to give you till next semester before I give you a grade, but you should really think about whether you want to keep going or whether you just want to count your losses and leave now. And it was really heartbreaking because I was studying so hard. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't like I was out partying or goofing off. Like I was really trying to get good grades.
That's
And
when you
I
call
just,
the guy from Harvard Law and say, "Hey, look, I need a couple tips about how to write."
yeah. I and it was, and then when I heard that, I was like, I'm also a very stubborn person. And I was like, no, I'm not quitting. Like, I'm going to figure this out. If it kills me, I'm going to figure this out. So I like went like turbo on like the studying even more.
Wow.
And I just kept reading cases, case law. And then just like, trying to figure out like what style am I supposed to be writing in? And then I got an A for the second semester.
Wow. In writing?
And then I made Dean's List. Yeah.
So what do you
And
think
all
it
my
was
grades
about the
actually.
writing? Because I know writing was tough. Like, do you remember? Like, I know that's a very specific question. Um,
I feel like when I was reading the cases, I didn't really understand like what the whole ultimate holding was because
okay.
there's so much fluff, I feel like, in
Yeah.
cases.
Okay.
They're like it could be this, but it could be that, and then blah, 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 but we nonetheless hold this. And I feel like for
Okay.
me to find that little like piece of whatever, like to uncover that piece was so hard for me.
Okay.
And it's, I think it's one of those things that you just have to keep practicing, and finally like something clicks. Because even if someone told me like the answer for one of the cases or for one of the briefs, I would have failed the second one.
I mean,
So
there
it's
are no
something I
answers,
had to
right? There are no
uncover.
answers. I mean, they could tell
Yeah,
you yeah, I understand. I get it. It's a
yeah.
method and it's not really like an answer. Everybody has an opinion. I mean, all right. So that's interesting.
But it's a
But
good method. I left leaving, like it is a good method because once you catch on to it, you can only use it to your benefit. Like now all the cases I read, I'm like, they do this for like so many reasons because you want to be able to flip flop. Like
yeah,
law is just that.
well,
You
that's
want
what
to
it
always
is.
have a
Yeah,
way out.
right. That's what it is. It's amazing. Um, so was it always immigration, do you think? Like, did you have something in mind, like when you were in law school? Like, when did you say, okay, like this will be it for me?
I did not want immigration. I went in saying I was not going to do immigration. Um, I had interned before I went to law school at an immigration firm, and I said, this is definitely not for me. I did real estate for a little bit. And then my third year or my second year of law school, Department of Homeland Security was looking for interns. So
It's amazing.
I was like, I was like, it's a government job. Maybe I want to do like Department of Justice or something. So I took it. I took the internship, and then I ended up getting hired my third year. So it was kind of, I feel like it kind of chose me. I didn't really,
Yeah. Did you have to
or we
go through the
chose each
whole like
other. I don't know.
USA? Did you have to go through the whole USA jobs thing? Like I remember I was actually just talking to somebody today about like usajobs.org or gov, usajobs.gov, and they're like, here, upload your resume, and then you go to the next page and it's like, okay, write your resume out. And then they're like, that's kind of complicated process. I mean, I have a quasi governmental job now for my my full-time job, which I love, by the way. And but it wasn't like that.
I so like back in 20, what year was it? Like 2010, 2011. Anyway, so Department of Justice and Immigration, they were one branch at one point, and the Department of Justice had its honors program. And then when DHS was created in 2003, that's when they separated, and Department of Homeland Security didn't have an honors program for so long. So when I graduated in 2010, that's when they started their honors program. So I didn't go through USA Jobs. I did it separately, but
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, USA Jobs is a pain.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was kind of a separate side note. So hopefully people fast forwarded that question I just asked. But all right. So you got a job with U.S. Department of Homeland Security, and you stayed there almost 13 years. It couldn't have been more like opposite of probably what you wanted to really be fighting for. But just like some prosecutors become defense attorneys or vice versa, I think it's like kind of a similar thing. So, like, what was it like to take the position there, knowing that you were going to be advocating on the other side of what your parents had gone through? Um,
So
yes, go ahead.
I feel like that's a very difficult question. When I graduated law school, I would say I was young, and my family always believed that the government or a government job was like the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah, yeah,
So they were like, everybody was very supportive. And I think at the time when I was starting, I didn't exactly know what I would be doing. I knew immigration court was a thing and that I would be going to court, but I didn't realize how much policy would really influence the decisions that I had to make. Because, at some point you hope that you have some discretion as a prosecutor or as someone working for the government. And so that definitely changed with the administrations. And I feel like I started in New York City, and the landscape there, especially at the time in 2010, was very different from what it became in 2016, 2017.
Right. And just to kind of further my last question, your website even says, "I was an unlikely prosecutor responsible for representing America's interests inside the immigration courtroom, yet I carried pieces of my mother's secret." So, like, throughout your job there, you kind of knew that you probably wanted to be doing something like to the contrary of, representing those interests, right?
Yeah, and I feel like I go back to discretion because, like, there was one thing that my mom had said to me, and even though she said it when I was a lot older, it's something I always felt. And she always said that, like, she said when she came into this country, she was stopped at the border, and the immigration official who stopped her, she was like, he was so nice. He had blonde hair and blue eyes, and he was so nice to me. He let me come to New Jersey. And she was only like detained for a few days. But the way she described him, like, he was so nice. And I feel like, yes, we have laws to uphold, but, to have that discretion and to be able to have that ability to be like, well, this isn't a case that should be prosecuted, or this isn't a case,
Right.
this is a case that we should probably close out. And then there were cases like, not to talk too much about our political leanings, but there were some cases where sometimes I took a hard stance because, people had done horrible things and they committed, really bad crimes. Or
Right.
there were other cases where you knew people were really lying. Like, there was this whole fraud thing, and they mostly concerned Chinese asylum cases where this immigration lawyer made millions of dollars coaching people to tell a fake story in the
Wow.
courts in New York. He even had paralegals that would say, this is what you have to say, go memorize it. And then at the time, one of the agencies allowed asylum seekers to bring in their own interpreters. So the interpreters would know the story, so that if the client said something wrong or messed up on a date, the interpreter knew and they would translate it in English the way it was supposed to be.
Wow.
So, like, it was a lot of seeing those things and those types of frauds that you're kind of like, all right, well, this story doesn't fit, like, or you could tell someone was lying, but it's so difficult to prove fraud.
How did it, like, really change during, this is my last question about this. So, like, how did it really change tangibly, like, when Trump was president? Like, we hear about all these immigration changes, but can you give us, like, maybe a couple things that actually, like, tangibly changed with, like, the laws or, like, people's hardships or being deported? I think I read on your website.
Yeah, I feel like once, so with Obama, there was a lot of discretion, and, immigration wasn't detaining everybody. There were cases that we were closing out, like if people had been in the country for over 10 years, which millions of people have been in this country for more than 10 years without the ability to get legal status, we were closing those cases. So it wasn't like, mom and pop show up, the American child is there, they don't really have a case, but they're in immigration proceedings. All right, we can close your case. You don't get legal status, but you don't get a deportation order either. So we move on. But with Trump, that changed, like, abruptly. Everybody became an enforcement priority. And the way that Trump, I think, was using detention was a very difficult thing to come to terms with. And for me, what really kind of started to eat at my soul was when I was listening to stories on, like, NPR News about children dying in immigration detention.
Mm.
And, the only way that I knew about that was because I heard it on the news. Like, there was no communication with the employees of the agency to say, or even acknowledge it.
Right.
And I feel like that part was like the start of my separation, because yes, we have laws, and they may not be fair. People may think what they think about them, but to have those laws undermine the value of a life, to me, that's where it was like, I cannot, like, it was emotionally very difficult to be part of an organization that just did not value a human life.
So that was like the end of it for you. Like that was like, I can't be here if this is what the administration is, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's when it was just,
so then you had enough. You made this big life change, and congratulations, because I think you've been at it since February. You came
thank
up with
you.
yeah, that's amazing. You've come up with the concept of humanigration. Did I say it correctly?
Yep.
Tell us about Humanigration. Like, when did you find it was time to launch it, and where did you come up with the name?
Um, I don't know. I feel like, so in my struggle, because like you said, like, it's to make a pivot from the government to going on your own mentally was a very difficult
Well, I was going to ask you
decision for
actually if
me.
there's like conflict of interest stuff you had to go through, like to like, I know like
No,
there's so many different cases, but maybe to just, because you're going to go from doing one thing to maybe challenging the federal government.
yeah, no, no conflict of interest. But thank you for
All
putting
right.
that out there.
What's that?
No, but thank you for putting that out there. If anybody's listening, I mean, a lot of
No, there's
people.
no. I mean, you just said there's no conflict of interest, right? I mean, like,
Yeah, I feel like I've there's no it's not like I'm telling things that aren't already known in the public.
yeah.
And I'm not, like, maybe if I worked on a case and I was
Yeah.
like the prosecutor in the case and then I was trying to help that person, I would definitely, that would be a
So
conflict of
the answer is
interest.
no, Veronica.
Um,
The answer is no.
the
There's
answer is
no
no.
conflict of interest. Let's move on. So, how did you come up with the concept of humanigration? Like, what? Tell us. I mean, I love it. I think it's like genius. What? Tell us what it means.
So when I was in Homeland Security, I saw, even when people were represented, they had no idea what was going on in immigration court. And a lot of the times, unfortunately, like, it's a high volume practice for private attorneys, and they can't explain everything to everyone. There just isn't enough time, and it's very complicated, but not so much that you can't take, like, if you take the time to explain it to somebody, they would understand. It's just time consuming. And so after seeing so many people not understand, trying to ask questions, not know what happened after their case, I was like, someone really needs to fill in these holes, because, people rely on their attorneys, and to them, whatever you tell me is gold for a client, but that's not always the case. And so I created Humanigration to empower people, because they need to ask their attorneys the tough questions. Like, I want to know what strategy you're taking in my case and why. I want to have copies of all the documents that you're filing for me, and explain to me what it is. Don't just ask me to sign here and, everything will be okay.
So, are you like more practicing law or teaching or helping immigrants? Like, what are you doing the more of?
So with Humanigration, and that's a good question, because I feel like a lot of people come to me and they want me to represent them. And yes, I'm representing people because I still practice immigration law. I think it's good to, stay close to all the issues that are going on. But Humanigration is an educational platform. So it's to,
Okay.
teach people who are going through the process about their process, so that it's not a supplement for a lawyer. I think people still need to have an attorney when they're going through the process, because it is very complicated. But giving them that confidence where I can ask my lawyer this question, and he should be able, or she should be able, to answer it for me. That's the purpose of Humanigration. And also, like, to prepare them for the hearings. Sometimes they don't know what questions are going to be asked, and they just want to practice that. So I've been doing a lot of that. I've been doing some, mentoring for attorneys too, like young attorneys.
Right.
And I've been doing a lot of cross-examinations, like mock cross-examinations for other people's clients who want to get a feel for the real day.
Yeah.
That's been very helpful, I think.
Right. And so, not to not to miss like the last thing you said, like you're not only helping clients fill in the gap, like what attorneys might not know, and like prepping these clients, but you're teaching attorneys too. Like you have a whole
Yeah.
platform out there of classes that are teaching attorneys. And by the way, I love your website. Everybody should check
Thank
out
you.
humanigration.org. It talks about you, and it shares your story, and you have a lot of options on there. I was really interested to see, like, so you are teaching attorneys too who need to learn a little bit.
Yeah, because there's so many there's so many documents in an immigration case. And the thing with immigration is that, like, unlike a criminal case, the attorneys don't have to turn everything over. So they
Right.
can use whatever information they have on someone, and the attorney might not even know it exists or it's in their file, and then they get surprised on the day of court. So
So,
it's a lot
so
of
how
that,
do
a
you
lot of
work with the
teaching.
attorney? Like if somebody's represented, I know you kind of said it, but I just want to be clear about it. So somebody's represented, and like and then their client finds your website and says, hey, like, maybe my attorney didn't give me like this idea, and like this looks kind of interesting. Like, have you had that happen? Like, can you give me an example of like the type of like who comes to you and that sort of thing?
So I feel like, so I have a lot of people who come to me who don't have attorneys yet, but they've been summoned to court and they don't know what to expect. So I have a course on how to get through the immigration court hearings, and that they can just purchase on the site. And then with the attorneys, I feel like the attorneys come to me, they find me, and they find me to do like the mock cross examinations, and then
Okay.
we set up a Zoom call and we're all present, like the attorney, the client, and myself.
Would you say it's more attorneys who are doing like a few areas of the law, not really like dedicated immigration attorneys? Like somebody who might want to handle a case, like that's a general practitioner and they need like that extra assistance.
Yeah, and that's a good point because immigration is so large. Like there's business visas, there's family-based petitions, and there's removal proceedings. And so someone who might just do family-based petitions, that's very different than the immigration part and the removal process. So I'm launching in October, I'm going to do a whole removal defense course. And basically that's for new attorneys or attorneys who just want to get a competitive edge in the removal process.
Yep.
So it'll be going through, there's 9 courses, I'm offering CLEs, and it's just,
Wow.
we'll get into everything, like the documents, what they are, how to use them, what does the government usually have, how they use those documents, all of those issues. Constitutional law with immigration.
Wow. That's
Because
amazing. And I know where you can end up teaching next too. Lawyer Stories Connect. We're going to have instructors on there, and like you can be one of them and teach some. Okay.
that's
So
awesome.
that's really cool. So, I mean, by virtue of working for the government, the federal government for 13 years, you basically found like something that was a need. You found people that felt vulnerable going through the immigration process who didn't have the representation that they needed. And even if they did have the representation, it didn't feel complete. And you saw this from the government side. So like now, you're utilizing general knowledge to assist attorneys, to assist the client. I think it's a really amazing concept and thing that you have going on here. Congratulations. So my question is, what advice would you give someone new to the country who is unsure what to do?
The first thing is you have to consult with lawyers. A lot of people are so scared to do it because they think either number one, people are going to steal their money, or 2, they're going to get deported. So I feel like kind of killing those stereotypes, education and the information is so important. And once you have that, then you can decide what your next step is.
Okay. So Veronica, are you also assisting people with Humanigration outside of the New York area? Like, is this all throughout the U.S.?
Yes. So I've worked with people everywhere: Florida, California, Texas.
Okay, that's great.
Oh, outside of the U.S. too. Yes.
Outside of the U.S. Okay.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for someone who might see themselves like in your, excuse me, what advice do you have for people who see themselves in your story, like that have a similar sort of background?
I will say this, that when I gave my resignation at Homeland Security, some people were like, "You're crazy for leaving. Like, you have such a comfortable job." But there were a lot of other people who came into my office and closed the door behind them and said, "I wish I could do what you were doing because I'm so miserable here. And I just don't see an alternative. I have my kids in college. I have my
Yeah.
kids in daycare. I have my kids
Oh,
in,
it's killer.
like you have all those anchors that are just tying you down, and you think that that's the best it can get. But I feel like I would tell anybody to just do the inner work, to believe in yourself, that you're capable of swimming wherever you get thrown. Because if you did it through law school and you learn how to swim there, you can do it. You
Right.
can pivot. It's never too late.
I think that's a common thing I hear about people in law school. Like I've heard that a few times. Like if you throw yourself out there, like we've learned how to swim, like how to swim, how to keep ourselves afloat, how to hustle, basically, right? Um, so do you feel like you're living your passion? Like you're finally doing something that, I mean, it's incredible that you got all the experience, I think, but do you feel like you're living your passion by entering this sort of work with Humanigration?
I do. I feel like I'm creating something that, like the other day, a client won a case, and like I found out, like, and it was a case where everybody was like, "You're not going to win it. It's a loser case," because it wasn't the strongest. And when I got that, I was like, I almost cried. I like jumped and like, I was so happy. And I feel like building something from the ground up is rewarding. Building something that'll change people's lives and their generations to come is invaluable. So yes, I'm happy to be
Yeah,
doing this work.
that's so cool. Do you feel that lawyers who do work in an area where they've personally had a situation makes a difference for a client?
I think so. I think so, because you come with a different experience. You come with a different perspective on, the quote unquote situation. Um, so I definitely think it does.
So what can we expect from Humanigration like 5, 10 years down the road?
I am building up my community, and I want the community to speak for itself. Like, I want a place where people can go, lawyers, attorneys, therapists that serve them, all be connected in one place so they can all speak to each other. And so everyone can get on the same page about standards and what's best for the community.
Tell us more about the community. I'm a big community person. I love the feeling of community. I try to find community in like everything that I do, I guess. Like, and this was like more of a recent sort of thing for me. But tell me about your community at Humanigration and like what I actually really want to know what community means to you.
So the community for me, I feel like it's just a platform where everyone can connect. So I feel like if I'm a lawyer, I need to know how to serve, the clients. Therapists who have to draft, psychologist reports or psychological reports for people who are in proceedings. They also should know what the legal standards are. So for me, it's just everyone who is, um, who is inside the immigration journey, one place where everyone can meet together so that the knowledge is just shared through everyone in a safe space where people can be vulnerable.
Love that. So this is sort of a like a more general question, and this was something you wrote. So I'm only reading what something you wrote here. Okay, so
Okay.
you said in your lawyer story, actually on Instagram when we featured you, the Department of Homeland Security has given me a front row seat at just how broken the immigration process is. So, like, what can you tell us more about that? Like the immigration process as a whole?
So I'll just go back to the fraud story, and if people can come and lie about things that really didn't happen to them to get asylum, and then other people can come and tell the truth about fearing gangs in Honduras or being raped in Guatemala, and their cases get denied, how is our system working? Like, it just isn't. And so when I said that, that's basically what I mean. I do believe that there should be a system, but the system we have is beyond repair, and no one's willing to kind of go back to the drawing board, and they just ignore those issues.
Okay. So what advice do you have for a young attorney just starting out who might not know what field that they want to get into?
That's a good question. And I remember when I was starting out, and I feel like just trying everything. And then at the end of the day, sometimes, like, I don't know, for me, I feel like my path chose me, and, you know, whether I love it or hate it, it's part of the journey. And you can always, when you look back and you really try to understand why things happened to you the way they did, you can try to make sense of it. But just, you know, being present and understanding, well, maybe this is my path if an opportunity comes, and it's not the one that you expected or wanted it to be. It might be a stepping stone to something else.
Okay. So, is there anything else about Humanigration you want to tell us that I might have missed? I don't want to leave here today thinking that we missed something that you really wanted to share with the Lawyer Stories community.
No, I touched on like the new course that I'm launching in October, which I'm really excited about. It's going to be 9 weeks.
Wow.
And yeah, it's a long course because there's so much. And like when I was at Homeland Security, I did teach a lot. I was an instructor at FLETC, which is the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center for officers coming through the process. I did a lot of constitutional issues in New York. So I have I've always liked to teach.
That's great.
I'm excited about that course.
Remind us about the course coming out in October. What's the title?
It's called the Removal Defense Training Program.
Okay.
And it'll be 9 weeks on Wednesdays at 8:30 starting October 2nd.
Wow. Do you video these, or do you just kind of go through and then whoever's there?
I'm going to video them, and then I'll see how I, use the videos, but I'm going to video it because I think it's worth, recording.
Yeah, well, we'll discuss how we can try to get the word out too.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's important stuff you're doing. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. What else do we forget here today?
And Lawyers Connect, right? Yeah.
What's that? Lawyer Stories Connect.
And Lawyers.
We could talk about that after, but if you have about 4 hours, I could tell you all about it. No, I'm just kidding. So, what else did we leave anything else out today, Veronica?
No, I don't think so.
You don't think so? Okay, so Humanigration, I hope everybody checks out the website. It's really cool work that you're doing, coming from somebody who was behind the scene for 13 years and really found some loopholes and things that need to be done in the process. Thank you so much for being with us. And stay right there. Everybody, thanks for tuning in wherever you are in the world today. Enjoy yourselves. Cheers.